Exactly 6 p.m. here in Cairo. Very good day, dear viewers. It's time for Channel 2 News and 6 p.m. Channel 2 News. And we start off with the headlines. I'll be right back. At the end of the Russian-African summit in Sochi, President Sisi and his Russian counterpart addressed joint press conference. President Sisi meets with Ethiopian Prime Minister on the latest developments on the Renaissance Dam file. And Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli meets Minister of Public Business Sector to follow up on the progress of mega projects. As the Russia-Africa summit wrapped up in the resort of Sochi, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi expressed his gratitude for Russia's President Vladimir Putin over hosting the event. Addressing a joint press conference along with his Russian counterpart, President el-Sisi said that the summit largely managed to clarify the two parties' vision on a number of international issues of relevance to the world peace, stability and sustainable development. The president said that the African-Russian summit provided opportunities to exchange views of points towards a number of issues of mutual concern, adding that the summit's final communique reflected the principles agreed upon for achieving security and stability through a more fair and equal system which supports political settlements to the crisis in Africa. The Russian president said that the summit reflected the deep-rooted and distinguished ties abiding Russia and the African continent, adding that prompting bilateral ties is a top priority for his country. Russian President Vladimir Putin noted that both sides are keen to double the amount of trade volume, which now exceeds $20 billion. Meanwhile, President el-Sisi and his Russian counterpart witnessed the signing of a set of cooperation agreements between Russia and the African Union. Signing the agreements was Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov on behalf of Russia and Chief of the African Union Commission Moussa Faki on behalf of the African Union. During the inaugural session of the Russia-Africa Summit in Sochi, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi asserted today that African peoples and Russia are strongly bound by common challenges and aspirations, the matter which requires launching a vision for consolidating the African-Russian cooperation into a broadened spectrum. President el-Sisi invited Russian President Vladimir Putin and other leaders to take part in the first Aswan Forum for Peace and Sustainable Development, due to be held on December the 11th. The president emphasized the urgent need for supporting the African Union policies for the post-conflict reconstruction and development efforts across the continent. Russian president, meanwhile, noted that the president played an important role while preparing for his summit in his capacity as the current chairman of the African Union. The Russian leader said that this summit lays the ground for future cooperation between his country and African countries, adding that prompting economic, social and trade ties with the Black continent remains a top priority for Moscow. He expressed concern over the instability marrying Africa, mentioning a number of national conflicts which are basically emanating for domestic political, economic or social crisis. Putin further affirmed his country's willingness and readiness to support Africa in combating terrorism and extremism, as well as cross-border crimes and maritime piracy. And prior to the summit, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi met Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed on the latest developments of the Renaissance Dam file. Ahmed asserted that his recent remarks before the Ethiopian parliament have been trimmed out of context, and asserted his appreciation and respect for Egypt's political leadership and people. The Ethiopian Prime Minister elaborated that his remarks included his country's commitment to building the dam without causing any harm to the water interests of the stream countries. He went on to affirm that the Egyptian stability and that of Ethiopia is a value added to the Black continent, and to that end, His country would always abide by negotiations until a final agreement is hammered out on the dam. Meanwhile, President Sisi reiterated Egypt's openness and understanding of the Ethiopian development pursuits. But in the meantime, the country is committed to its historic right in the Nile River waters. Thus, he elaborated that these development efforts should not cause any harm to such a right, adding that being extended to Egypt from Ethiopia, the Nile River should lay the basis of cooperation between the two countries and not to be the reason to any conflicts. During the meeting, the two sides agreed
القاهرة وموسكو شراكة استراتيجية، علاقات سياسية واقتصادية ودبلوماسية انطلقت قبل 76 عاماً، توطدت خلالها روابط متميزة في مختلف الأصعدة على مدار تلك العقود. شهدت السنوات الأخيرة تعاوناً وتطوراً نوعياً في العلاقات المصرية الروسية في جميع المجالات، أبرزها في مجال الطاقة، متمثلاً في محطة الضبعة النووية، ثاني أكبر مشروع للطاقة في تاريخ مصر، بقدرة إنتاجية تبلغ 4800 ميجاوات بتكلفة تتجاوز 21.3 مليار دولار. كذلك التعاون المصري الروسي في إنشاء المنطقة الصناعية الروسية شرق بورسعيد، والتي تعد من أكبر المشروعات القومية في مصر باستثمارات تقدر ب6.9 مليار دولار وعلى مساحة تبلغ 5.25 كيلومترا. في مجال النقل والمواصلات تم توقيع عقود توريد 1300 عربة سكك حديد جديدة بتكلفة تناهز 22 مليار دولار لتكون الأضخم في تاريخ السكك الحديدية المصرية. كما شهدت السنوات الأخيرة زيادة مضطردة في نسبة حجم التبادل التجاري بين البلدين، كذلك زيادة في نسبة الصادرات المصرية إلى روسيا، ووصل عدد الشركات الروسية التي تستثمر في مصر إلى 472 شركة حتى عام 2018. العلاقات المصرية الروسية لتحقيق المصالح المشتركة.
Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli met today Minister of Public Business Sector Hisham Tawfiq to follow up the progress of work at a number of important files and projects. The meeting touched on the pace of work at Gasur project, the new system for cotton trading and cooperation with China on electric car manufacturing. The minister noted that the first phase of Gasur project being adopted by his ministry was launched with the aim of boosting external trade between Egypt and African nations. The first phase focuses on providing regular weekly maritime services extended from El Ain El Sokhna port to Kenya's Mombasa port at affordable prices. Lebanese President Michel Aoun said today he was ready for a dialogue with protesters to help save the country from collapse, and he suggested a government reshuffle was possible. In a televised address, Aoun promised to fight state corruption that he said had eaten the country to the bone and assured protesters that their shouts will not be wasted. He also went on to say there was a need to review the current government, hinting a reshuffle could be in the cards, but warned protesters that the system could not be changed by crowding public places. Protesters expressing outrage with a ruling elite seen as corrupt have swept Lebanon since last week, paralyzing the country despite announced reforms intended to appease discontent and win over Western donors that have pledged badly needed aid. Syrian Democratic Forces SDF accused Turkey today of launching a large land offensive targeting 3 villages in northeast Syria, despite a truce, but Russia said the peace plan hammered out this week was going ahead smoothly. Under the plan agreed by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin, Syrian Kurdish forces are to withdraw more than 30 kilometers from the Turkish border. Russia said it was sending more military policemen and heavy equipment to help implement the deal, which has already prompted U.S. President Donald Trump to lift sanctions against Turkey. Meanwhile, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper, speaking in Brussels ahead of a NATO meeting, said Turkey, which annoyed Washington this year by buying Russian-made S-400 missile defense systems, was moving in the wrong direction. EU President-elect Ursula von der Leyen announced today that the likelihood of the EU extending the UK's Brexit deadline looks good, after which Britain should put forward a candidate for the European Commission. He added that a further Brexit delay would mean the UK should put forward a nominee to join the incoming cabinet of EU commissioners. EU member states yesterday backed a plan to postpone Brexit beyond October 31st, after which Prime Minister Boris Johnson was compelled to send an extension request under a law passed by Rebels MPs. Well, dear viewers, this is all for the political segment, and now we move on to the world of economics and finance, where Egypt's stock market indices collectively rose during today's dealings. The weekend session boosted by purchasing operations by foreign investors. The benchmark EGX 30 index added 0.5% to exceed 14,200 points, and the capped EGX 30 index was also up 0.9%. The medium capped index EGX 70 and the more expanded EGX 100 index both edged higher 0.4%. European stock markets mostly climbed today as investors digested mixed company earnings, awaiting an ECB monetary policy meeting. Despite robust gains for the London, Frankfurt and Paris indices approaching the halfway stage, and Helsinki fell into the red. Most Asian equity markets closed higher today, following a positive lead from Wall Street. MSCI's broadest index of Asia-Pacific shares outside Japan advanced 0.4%, with Japan's Nikkei rising 0.66% to a one-year high, and Australian shares climbed 0.5%, while South Korea's Kospi eased 0.1%. Oil jumped after U.S. government data showed a surprise draw in the country's crude stocks. U.S. crude climbed 2.7% to settle at $55.96, while Brent rose 2.5% to $61.17. Benchmark 10-year notes last rose 3.32 in price to yield 1.75% from 1.76 late yesterday. This is all for this edition of the news. I'm Rana Qassas. Thank you so much for joining.